Hi, Janine Cammarata here, ready to read Chapter 11 of Shimmer's Eggs. In Chapter 10, they lost the puzzle, or rather their mother gave it away. Can't imagine why she would have done that, but they have found another, and now we're seeing what is next in the world of Dragonia. And here comes Chapter 11. So you see, after the dragons hatched, Lord Tam waged war to gain my hand in marriage and take the dragons. Why doesn't anyone stand up to him? Mark asked. Since both of my parents are missing and believed to be dead, no one wants to anger Tam. I should have the authority, but we do not have enough men to lead an attack. We only have enough to hold our castle. The hope is that now that you are here, you will be able to find my parents and save the golden dragon. Do you have any idea where your parents are? Rose asked. Meriwether rolled onto her knees and grabbed Rose's hands. I think I do. Meriwether looked around her in suspicion, even though it was obvious they were all alone. About a week ago, I received a message. All the knight could say was that an old man limping by his horse asked that he deliver an urgent note to me. What did the note say? Peter asked. Meriwether pulled out a piece of parchment and said it was a riddle. What goes up must come down when a smile is a frown. In the dark skies I flew to where the water and sky meet blue. Back to the golden scales I have traveled so that this tale may be unraveled. I have no idea what that means. It hurts my head, Peter complained and covered his face. Rose giggled, but Luke and Mark sat down and reread the riddle. Luke peered into his pocket kaleidoscope as Mark reread the first line out loud. What goes up must come down when a smile is a frown. A roller coaster, Luke guessed. When you go upside down, your smile is a frown. There aren't any roller coasters here, Luke, Peter said. Have you forgotten? Mark can draw one, he replied. Rose sat down next to her brother. Why would we need a roller coaster? I don't know, Rose, Mark said, and wrote roller coaster at the top of the blank page. Rose read the next line. In the dark skies I flew to where the water and sky meet blue. That sounds like the horizon over the water, Luke said and asked. Where is the largest body of water? Do you know where it ends? Meriwether tapped her long finger against her chin and thought. She said, I have traveled beyond my land except to the great gathering that happens once a year. I have heard stories of ships traveling on water farther than the eyes can see, but that is beyond where I have been. The kids knew this to be true, but they didn't know if the land was formed the same here. When is this gathering and how many days does it take to get there? Mark asked. 5 days on horseback, and it is in a fortnight. I did not plan to go this year because of all that has happened. Maybe some knights there can help you fight the evil guy, Peter said. It's possible. I have not thought of that. We could get there in one day if we rode our dragons, Luke said. Will they let us ride them? Rose asked. They will, but they need to be comfortable with you, and they haven't flown for great distances. They are still young. Sounds like they need some intense training like the beginning of soccer season, Peter said. And swimming and basketball, Rose added. And wrestling. We could all help them, Mark said. That's great, but let's figure out this riddle. It's the key to the rest of the quest, Luke said. Peter read out loud. Back to the golden scales I have traveled, so that this tale may be unraveled. Before anyone could respond, Meriwether jumped from her chair. That is it. Why did I not know this before? What is it? Rose asked, catching Meriwether's excitement. Let us go upstairs. The dragons followed, making the room very cramped. She turned to the group. This tale is shown on the ceiling above. Look. The kids lay on top of their dragons and viewed the visual tale of dragon lore. Meriwether began. The dragons were not always able to have golden dragons. It was not until a male and his mate accidentally came upon a mountain that flowed with gold from its highest peak. Curious, the male flew too close and was splashed with the gold, which quickly turned the rest of his body the same color. Amazed, his mate touched the flowing gold with her talon and was also turned to gold. When they returned, some of the dragons feared this change, but others noticed that they flew higher, faster, and were stronger. When these two mated, one of their brood was also golden, while the others were regular dragons. Only the golden dragon possessed these special abilities. Wanting to be stronger and gain power, the leaders went to this mountain only to find that it no longer flowed with magical gold. The gold was solid. Several of the dragons became jealous, and eventually these two dragons and their babies were forced to leave their home forever because they were different. They are Shimmer's ancestors. The golden dragon has continued through her lineage. Perhaps Copper and my parents have gone to this place, which is indeed far across the waters. But if Lord Tam attacked them, why haven't they tried to get back here to help? They have to know you're in danger, Rose asked. Maybe they can't get back, Mark suggested. Why not? These are excellent questions, but the real question is, can we get to this place and back before my crystal turns black, Luke asked. Hey, you made a rhyme, Luke, Peter said. Luke glared at his little brother. We need to concentrate, Peter. Peter's cheeks turned red and he crossed his arms, clearly not willing to participate anymore. Patch licked Peter's head, so Peter leaned into him. Meriwether, can we take the puzzle with us and return from where we are? Mark asked. I do not know if the magic lies within me or in the dragons. As you know, I cannot leave, but if the magic is with them, then wherever they are, you may travel through the puzzle. Let us take the puzzle to the arena while you train with the dragons. Leave enough time so that if it does not work, you can get back into the castle. Could it send us into something like a black hole? Mark asked. At Meriwether's confused expression, he said, like an empty place, nowhere. Before Meriwether could respond, Luke said, I don't think so, Mark. Maybe we'll be in a slightly different spot like what happened to me, but what we're doing is very important to this time and place. We wouldn't be able to travel like this if we weren't really needed. Mark nodded with a worried face, but he trusted Luke, and they did give their word. They made their way back to the arena, and with the puzzle on a table in the corner, the four of them worked on climbing in the saddles onto their dragons' backs. Patch was very ticklish, and every time Peter stepped into the stirrup, his foot pressed into Patch's side, making him chuckle. His body vibrated, knocking Peter off. Patch, you need to stop laughing, Peter said, but the laughter was infectious, so he joined in. When they calmed down, Peter stepped back a few paces, ran toward his dragon, and like a pole vaulter, launched onto his back. We did it, Peter chimed as Patch giggled again. Rose managed to scramble onto Sparkle's back. Sparkle shook, spraying water onto Rose, but she didn't mind. She made a mental note to wear her bathing suit under her clothes whenever they visited. Otherwise, her clothes would always be soaked during their training. Boulder stood like a model waiting to be painted. Mark pulled himself up onto Boulder's back easily enough, but had to wipe his hands on his jeans since his palms were covered with charcoal from his dragon scales. Mark quickly opened his sketch pad and drew Boulder with a thin blanket lining his back. That should take care of any future mess, Mark thought. Norris was at the end of the arena, pumping his wings wide like a peacock and expanded his chest like a rooster. Luke could tell Norris liked to show off. All right, big guy, Luke said, walking toward him. It's time for you to show me what you can do. Not waiting for another word, Norris launched toward Luke with his snout low to the ground. Without any effort, Norris flicked Luke up into the air and seamlessly caught him in his saddle. The bulky dragon stood on his hind legs and bellowed a challenge to the world. Luke laughed as he held on. Norris was just about to set flight when Shimmer's bellow let the wind out of his wings. The enormous dragon, not much smaller than his mother, had the smarts to look sorry. He spun his head around to nuzzle Luke's leg. Luke patted his head. You just need to be a little calmer, but I understand your enthusiasm. Well, that was most impressive, Meriwether said. Keep him low to the ground, give the command for your dragon to take flight using the word fly. They did, and like an overgrown carousel, the four flew in a circle one way and then the other. Using straps to change directions and speed, the kids lost track of time when Luke said, It's time to go. Immediately, the dragons descended upon command, ground, and the kids slid off. Meriwether hugged each of them. When she came to Luke, she said, Sure, Luke, remember what I said? She smiled, but her eyes held a sadness that Luke thought was because they were leaving. I know, we'll be back in 2 days. He said this, but felt uneasy. They said quick goodbyes and gathered by the puzzle. What did Meriwether want you to remember? Peter asked Luke. Luke didn't look at his brother. He said, Everything's fine. We need to go. Peter didn't press it, but knew his brother was hiding something. The basement looked the same, and when they placed their hands on the puzzle, they returned to their world. That Sunday, Mark and Rose begged their parents to bring them over to Luke and Peter's house. Luke showed Mark his new Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and he placed them in clear plastic protectors. He wanted to see how many he could collect and enjoyed playing a card game with them. No one liked playing games against Luke because he was a mastermind of strategy. He could see 3 steps ahead in chess or Stratego. His favorite game was Samurai, and only his mom had the patience to play with him. He beat her in a few hands, and they'd start over again. Guys, are you ready? Rose asked, impatient to see Sparkle. She wore her tie-dye blue one-piece bathing suit under her yoga pants and t-shirt. She also put on her sweatshirt with rhinestones. It may not be as glamorous as what Meriwether wore, but Rose knew she could never go wrong with some bling. Carefully unrolling the puzzle, Peter took the piece out of his pocket. He was terrified he would lose it, so he kept it in a locked blue metal box on his dresser. Everyone gathered around the puzzle they set up in the treehouse, which Luke and Peter built with their dad in the backyard. When Peter placed the piece into its proper place, it glowed, and they ended up outside the castle walls by the entrance to the forest. Shimmer and her dragons waited for them. A page held the puzzle in a box. Luke said, "Mount your dragons and let's go inside the castle." The page climbed onto Shimmer's back after placing the puzzle in a satchel, and they flew to the open arena. Patch stumbled a little while landing, launching Peter over his head. Luckily, Patch was fast enough and caught him before he hit the ground. "You need to pay attention and hang on, Peter," Luke said. "I don't want you getting hurt." "I know," Peter said, mad that his brother still thought he could treat him like a baby, even though Luke was only 2 years older. Peter was going into 5th grade, for crying out loud. "I see the puzzle worked. As we now know that the magic is with the dragons, you can travel further. It is time for you to train on how to ride and fight." They all wore chainmail, and Peter slipped his bow and arrow across his shoulders as Luke sheathed his sword. "Sir Mark, although your pencil is a mighty weapon, I feel you must have something else." She handed him a stick that was covered in black leather but had a hard ball at one end. Mark stared at it, not knowing what he was supposed to do. As he was raised to be polite, he said, "Thanks, Merryweather." The princess laughed and asked, "Would you like to know what it does?" "It does something?" Mark asked, not meaning to be funny, but everyone laughed as they gathered closer. "Not too close," Merryweather warned. Taking the stick from Mark, she pressed the button at the bottom, and the stick became taller than Mark. "Wow," Rose exclaimed, "that's cool." Mark thought it was rather uncanny that he had just started bow staff lessons at his karate school and knew a few things about the weapon. He took it from Merryweather's outstretched hand, twisted it in front of him, and whipped it over his shoulder, getting the feel of the weapon. "Press the button again to close it," Merryweather said. Knowing that Rose was showing great restraint, not asking what her weapon was, Merryweather handed her a thick rope with a ball attached to each end. "What is it?" Rose asked. "It's a bowler," Luke said. "That's great, but what am I supposed to do with it?" "You hold onto the middle of the rope, swing it around your head, and throw it at your enemy. The balls are hard enough to knock your enemy out, or you can trip them by throwing it at their legs. It's a very effective weapon, and with your accuracy in basketball, it's perfect for you." Rose beamed and put the weapon in her pocket. They each hopped onto their dragons' backs, fully armored, weapons at the ready. Shimmer flew into the sky ahead of them and flipped and soared. Her dragons followed their mother and soon glided behind her, copying every move. Just as Rose said, "This is fun," Shimmer flipped midair and the dragons did the same. Peter fell off Patch, held on tight with one hand, and was saved when his dragon flipped back over. "That was close," Mark yelled, his normal calm demeanor evaporating with fear. "Shimmer says to squeeze your knees together," Luke said. Peter muttered under his breath, wondering why no one else fell out of their saddle. As Patch swayed back and forth, Peter swayed with him and realized it wasn't much different than riding a dirt bike. Then he remembered watching Travis Pastrana do a double flip on his dirt bike. Pastrana would arch his back and lean into the flip. The momentum kept his legs in place, so maybe pushing on the pegs helped. Peter tightened his stirrups, hoping his feet wouldn't fall out again. Luke wondered if this was part of the riddle, or if the ride to the gathering would be like a roller coaster ride. Would it be dangerous? Would they make it there in one day? Would he be strong enough to do whatever had to be done to reunite Merryweather with her parents and Shimmer with her mate? The start of school was only 3 days away. Yes, Luke's wish was to make it to the first day of school, but he wanted to do it whole. He dreaded explaining to his classmates why he didn't have any hair on his head. He didn't think he could take people looking at him with pity. Luke only wanted to be treated like a normal child. Luke shook off any fear or doubts and rode on the back of Norris, getting a feel for how the dragon turned and anticipated his movements. Luke was in the moment, excited to be so high in the sky, free of all worries, except for falling off, he guessed. Luke knew that Norris would save him. He heard Shimmer's voice in his head and yelled the command ground. Everyone landed in the arena. "How did you fare?" Merryweather asked as she passed around mugs of water. They drank deeply, not realizing how physically exhausting it was riding a dragon. "Besides the fact that we almost lost Peter, it was fantastic," Rose replied. "I had it under control," Peter grumbled, not wanting to be the center of attention for screwing up. "That is how we learn, Sir Peter. You will never make the same mistake again. Would you agree?" Merryweather said. Peter shrugged his shoulders and said, "No, I guess not." After a short break, Merryweather started dragon sparring drills. This involved riding on the dragons and attacking a stationary target with their weapons. Luke went first. He drew his sword and had a hard time keeping his sword still as Norris's steps shook him like an elephant. He laughed because his papa always said that Luke's mom walked like an elephant going up and down the stairs. "Norris, try to walk smoother. Don't stomp. Glide." Luke pictured himself smoothly walking along the dojo floor in karate and felt the shift in Norris's step. Luke's eyebrows shot up. "You could see what I pictured in my head?" Norris bellowed, so Luke took that as a yes. This could come in very handy for communication, Luke thought. Now that it was easier to see the target, Luke practiced leaning forward and toward the right so he could reach the pile of hay that had a face painted on it. A few times the sword stuck in the hay, and Luke tried not to think about the possibility of having to really stab someone with his sword. He did it often enough in video games, but he knew the difference between that and real life. Rose went next. She hadn't had time to practice with her bola, and then a thought occurred to her. Meriwether, how am I going to get my weapon back? I only have one shot. If I miss, I'm in big trouble. Meriwether smiled and petted Sparkle's side as she peered up at Rose. Your bola is very special. Can you snap your fingers? Sure, Rose said, and snapped her fingers on both hands. Excellent. Throw your bola at one of the poles. Carefully folding her bola in half, Rose held onto the rope with one hand. With one eye closed and her tongue sticking out of her mouth, Rose swung it over her head and let loose. The bola missed the pole and hit the wall behind it. That was terrible, Rose said. Snap your fingers once, Meriwether said, ignoring Rose's criticism of herself. Breathing out in frustration, Rose snapped her finger and the bola appeared in her hand. Way cool, Rose said. How did it do that? Meriwether said, it is connected to you and will always find its way back now that you have thrown it. Why don't you and Sparkle go to the far wall and practice your aim? It was Peter's turn. He had strong legs and solid stomach muscles. He thought about the Robin Hood movie where one of the merry men stood on his horse to shoot a bow and arrow. As Patch stepped forward, Peter stood in his stirrups, keeping his core and leg muscles tight. Taking a deep breath, he pulled back the string on his bow and hit the target. It was the outermost ring, but he still hooted with success. He retrieved the arrow and took a few more turns with Patch moving faster and faster. It was easy on the ground. The real test would be in the air. Finally, it was Mark's turn. Mark had taken the time to draw some attack forms with his bow staff. When he was done with a few moves on separate pages, he flipped through and could see the stick figures flow through the motion of the full technique. Even though he would be on Boulder's back, the upper body movements would be the same. There were melons on top of hay bales on both sides of him. Closing his eyes, Mark pictured the staff as an extension of his arm and knocked the melons off. When Mark first began karate and had to spar, his body felt like it would shut down, and he became so frustrated because he couldn't remember any of the techniques. Instructor Adam taught him how to visualize the technique all the way to scoring a point. Let's do this, Boulder, Mark said, tapping his dragon on the back. Boulder moved like he weighed a ton, but a few taps from Mark got him moving a bit faster. Luckily, he can fly fast, Mark thought. They'd never have a chance otherwise. Mark swung the staff in a downward arc to his left, knocking the melon clean off the bale and then seamlessly hitting the melon on the right. He pierced the smiling hay bale that Luke had stabbed earlier and then twirled the staff above his head like a propeller. It caused the dirt on the ground to stir and the other kids had to shut their eyes. Stop it, Mark, Peter yelled, and Mark lowered his staff. That was fantastic, Luke said, slapping his friend on the back. Let's go over the plan one more time before we have to leave. Peter groaned. We know everything already. One can never know strategy too well, and it is vital that you look at every angle before going into battle, Meriwether said. Rose still couldn't believe they were preparing for battle. She likened it to training for basketball tryouts or qualifying for swimming. You set a goal, trained your body to be the best it could be. Rose knew that playing sports was just as much a mental game as it was physical, sometimes more, her dad always told her. And to be honest, she knew she struggled with that. She was never certain if she had what it took to win. She played and made the best teams, but what happened if she didn't grow or wasn't as strong and lagged behind? Could she catch up? Rose, are you listening? Mark asked, interrupting her thoughts. What? Oh, yes, she said. Rose wouldn't let her team down, for that's what they were, a team. And that's what happened with most teams. They became a family. The four of them had always been a family for as long as Rose could remember. She loved Peter and Luke like they were her own siblings. It was strange and heartwarming that her family had grown to include a gorgeous medieval princess and adorably beautiful dragons. No one would ever believe her. The next time we come back, we'll fly over the Arcadian mountains with our dragons in search of the gathering. When we get there, we'll hopefully find some willing knights who will help us save the king. Rose interrupted. Do any of the kingdoms have dragons? Meriwether thought, I do not know. Dragons are supposed to be able to sense one another, but we are so far removed, Shimmer has not noticed. Plus, she and Copper have not been a part of another dragon family in a very long time. They may not accept your dragons. Luke said, It's too bad Shimmer can't come with us, but I understand she needs to be here with you. Luke checked his crystal. We have to leave. After saying goodbye to Meriwether and the dragons, the kids touched the puzzle. Luke let out a cry. Even though they had all had their hands on the puzzle, his form lingered for a moment. Meriwether stared in horror as his body appeared to be caught in between worlds. Luke flickered one more time, then he was gone. Peter, Rose, and Mark fell over one another in the cramped treehouse. "This is the last time we travel from this treehouse. It's too small," Peter said, and then gasped. Luke's body appeared and then faded out like the end of a home video. Rose reached for him, and when he looked solid, grabbed his wrist and pulled. Luke fell on her out of breath. "What happened?" Mark asked, kneeling. His friend didn't respond. "Something's wrong. Get your mom, Peter," Mark said. Peter didn't wait to be asked twice. He catapulted down the yellow slide and ran toward the house, screaming for his mom. We'll see you next time for Chapter 12.